I almost didn't take the Crestview account in the first place. The property manager, Donna, had called 3 different plumbers before me, and all 3 had ghosted her after the first visit. She didn't tell me that up front. I found out later from the building super, who said it like it explained something. That place has a way of chewing people up, he told me. I laughed it off at the time. I should have listened. For 2 years, I showed up whenever Donna called, sometimes at midnight, once on Christmas Eve in the rain, crawling through a crawl space with a flashlight in my teeth because a supply line had blown and water was already soaking through to the unit below. I knew that building better than I knew my own house. I knew which units had old valves that needed babying, which corridor had the pressure fluctuation nobody had ever properly diagnosed, which tenant would have coffee ready for me, and which one would stand over my shoulder the entire time asking questions. It was steady work, good money. I didn't think much about the politics of the place because that wasn't my department. Then one morning I found an envelope on my windshield with my license plate number written on the front. No name. Just the plate number, in blue ballpoint, like whoever left it had stood there, looked at my truck, and decided to address the letter directly to the vehicle rather than the person. That detail bothered me more than anything else in the envelope, and what was inside the envelope was already pretty alarming. $800 a month. Parking violation. Retroactive 60 days. I actually laughed, out loud, alone in the parking lot, because the space I was parked in was the contractor space. Donna had shown it to me personally on my first day, handed me a laminated card with the gate code, pointed at the row and said, "That's where you go." I still had the card. I kept it in my glove box because the code changed seasonally and I could never remember it. I thought this was some kind of clerical error, a new board member who hadn't gotten the memo, something that would take one phone call to untangle. Donna's voice when I called her told me immediately it wasn't that simple. She went careful in the way people go careful when they're already in the middle of something they don't want to explain. She told me the board president had filed a formal complaint and copied the regional director. I asked who the board president was. She said Patricia Gould. I asked who Patricia Gould was. Donna paused just slightly too long and said she was a newer resident who'd become quite involved. Quite involved. I wrote that phrase down on a scrap of paper for some reason. I still don't know why. What I couldn't have known then, and what completely changes the shape of this story, is that Patricia Gould had also called my biggest competitor the same week she filed that complaint. I found that out much later from a plumber I know who'd gotten a call from a woman at Crestview asking for rates and availability. He'd quoted her, said he could start the following month, and then never heard back. At the time, he thought nothing of it. At the time, so did I when he told me. It took me another 2 weeks to understand what that phone call actually meant. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I went to the next HOA board meeting because I had nothing to lose and I wanted to see who I was dealing with. Patricia Gould was exactly who I expected and also nothing like what I'd imagined. She was precise, organized, the kind of person who color codes her agenda and still finishes early. The other board members had that slightly deflated quality people get when they've stopped arguing with someone and started just waiting for meetings to end. She ran through her items efficiently, and when one of the older members near the end of the table raised a concern, gently, that some residents were having trouble getting contractors out quickly, Patricia said she wasn't aware of any such issue and would follow up with management directly. The way she said it closed the door on the conversation. Everyone felt it. Nobody walked through it. Driving home, I turned that moment over and over. Residents having trouble getting contractors out. 3 weeks had passed since my formal response, and Donna hadn't sent me a single work order. 2 years of twice-monthly calls, and then nothing. I phoned her the next morning. She said they were reviewing their vendor list. The words were professional. Everything underneath them was not. I understood then that the fine was never really about the parking space. So I did something I'm not entirely proud of, but also not entirely ashamed of. I called the tenant I'd gotten friendly with over the years, a retired teacher in Unit 7 who always had the coffee ready. I asked her casually how things had been going at the property. She talked for 20 minutes. Patricia, she said, had made some enemies. The door color rules had upset people. The holiday decoration policy had caused an actual screaming argument in the lobby in December. But here was the thing my tenant friend said almost as an afterthought, the thing that landed like a stone in still water. She said Patricia had also been asking around about who the regular contractors were. Not just me, all of them. The landscapers, the electricians, asking residents what they thought of the service, whether they'd noticed anything unprofessional, whether anyone had ever felt uncomfortable. She'd been building something. I just didn't know what yet. The answer came from the super, who had a talent for knowing things he probably shouldn't. He told me, with the particular satisfaction of someone delivering genuinely good information, that Patricia Gould owned a property management consulting firm. Small operation, but real. And one of the services she offered was vendor contract renegotiation. She would come into a community, audit the existing contractor relationships, replace them with vendors from her own preferred network, and charge the HOA a consulting fee for the transition. He said she'd done it at 2 other properties before Crestview. He said the plumber she'd brought in at one of those properties was a guy named Vickers. The same Vickers whose company had quoted Donna the week after my violation notice arrived. I sat with that for a long time, because it reframed everything. The fine wasn't punitive. It was a pressure mechanism. File a complaint, create a dispute, make the existing contractor uncomfortable enough to disengage, then present a ready replacement and collect the consulting fee. Clean. Almost elegant in a way that made me feel slightly sick to acknowledge. Here's what she hadn't counted on. Nobody in that building knew the infrastructure the way I did. Not Vickers, not anyone. There was a pressure issue in the East Corridor that I had been managing with a workaround for 14 months because the permanent fix required opening a wall, and the board at the time had approved the workaround to defer the cost. If you didn't know it was there, and you didn't know where the secondary shutoff valve I'd installed was located, and something went wrong on a Friday night, you were looking at significant water damage before you even got the right person on the phone. I wrote one letter. Not to the HOA, not to Patricia, to the regional director at the management company. I didn't mention Patricia's firm. I didn't use the word consulting or conflict of interest or anything that sounded like accusation. I just described the East Corridor situation in technical detail. I listed every emergency call from the past 8 months with response times. I noted politely that institutional knowledge of an older building's systems is not transferable overnight, and that transitions during winter months carry elevated risk. I attached everything and sent it. 10 days of silence. Then Donna called and asked if I could come in Thursday at 4. I sat outside that conference room for 40 minutes. I could hear the shape of the conversation through the wall without being able to hear the words. It rose, went flat, rose again, then went very quiet. When Donna came to get me, her expression was the expression of someone who has watched something happen and is choosing not to have an opinion. Patricia was at the table. She was looking at her hands. The regional director thanked me, told me the fine was rescinded, told me the parking policy would be clarified in writing. I said I appreciated the resolution. There was a long pause, and then I left. What the super told me afterward was that when the regional director had asked Patricia directly whether she had a professional relationship with the replacement vendor she'd recommended, the room had changed. I don't know exactly what was said. I know that Patricia Gould resigned from the board 11 days later citing personal reasons. I know that the Vickers quote never went anywhere. I know that when I showed up the following Monday morning, Donna's work order was already on my phone before I'd pulled into the lot. I've thought about Patricia a lot since then. Not with anger exactly, more with something uncomfortable that I don't have a clean word for. Because she wasn't wrong that she didn't know me. She hadn't watched me work. She'd seen a truck she didn't recognize and decided it was an opportunity. That's a fairly human thing to do. What she hadn't seen, because she couldn't have from where she was standing, was Christmas Eve in the rain, 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, the tenant in Unit 13 who would have come home to a destroyed ceiling. She'd been so focused on the transaction she was trying to build that she'd never looked at what she was actually dismantling. The laminated card with the gate code is still in my glove box. The code changed again last month and Donna texted me the new one. I still park in the same spot. I still know where that secondary shutoff valve is, the one in the East Corridor, the one I installed 14 months ago that nobody else knows about. Some mornings I pull in and I think about how close it came, how a different version of this, one where I just paid the fine and walked away, would have meant a contractor who didn't know that valve existed, didn't know what it was connected to, didn't know what would happen on a cold night if the wrong fitting failed. I think about that, and then I get out of the truck and go do my job.